Grand Rising, y'all. Welcome back to the MME YouTube channel, where we're here to help guide, facilitate, and educate you on your holistic wellness journey. My name is Tyler Egan, and I will be your wellness mentor and educator for today's video. And in today's video, we got a little bit of a different setting here. I felt really called to come up to the woods. There's this really cool mini hiking trail near my apartment. It's like 3 or 4 miles away. Apparently there's trucks that drive through here. I didn't know that. And I felt really called to come up here and film this because today's video we're going to be discussing we're going to actually be piggybacking off of last week's video where we discussed the 3 mental barriers that stifle our spiritual development. And so if you haven't watched that video, there will be a link down below, or maybe a card thing will pop up here. I want to encourage you to check that one out first and then come back to this one. It might make a little bit more sense. So like I said, in today's video, we're piggybacking off that and we're going to discuss the fear of judgment. It's this crippling, anxious-ridden fear that seems to have many of us, for lack of a better phrase, by the balls, or it's like quicksand that you just can't get out of. And so I want to offer you some insight to help you get out of that quicksand and overcome those fears. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the fear of judgment is, some different types of fears of judgment. I wasn't sure how to phrase that. Different types of fear of judgment, where it stems from, and then how to overcome it. There will be timestamps down below if you want to go ahead and skip around to one of those parts. And the YouTube thing, if you take anything from this video, we would really appreciate it if you could leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content like this. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into this. So fear of judgment, what is it? Well, we're going to take a step back and talk about judgment, how we defined it last week. Someone's preconceived notion or opinion based off of biases, or maybe it's previous experiences or information that someone's learned, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to add one thing to it. It's someone's or some things opinion based off of preconceived notions, biases, experiences, all the things. The something will make sense in a moment here. So then what is the fear of judgment? Well, the fear of judgment is our sympathetic nervous system response, or better said, reaction, our reactive response, our reaction to the perceived threat, fear of judgment. So when you feel threatened by someone's opinion or judgment, it's how your sympathetic nervous system responds to that perceived threat. And I say perceived because everyone perceives it differently, like what the threat is. I'm not saying that your perception is invalid. So with that in mind, it comes down to 3 different nervous system responses, or 3 different nervous system reactions. It can be, you've heard the fight or flight, right? So fight, flight, or freeze. So let's talk about those 3 things really fast. So fight is maybe you get a little defensive or hostile when you can feel someone like projecting their energy or their judgments or opinions onto you, and you immediately get defensive. And it doesn't have to mean you're ready to fight them. It just means like you could be ready to argue, or you get defensive right away in a reactive fashion. So you throw a wall up. Then there's flight, right? Or let's put it differently, flee. So maybe you're avoidant when this threat surfaces in your everyday life, and a coworker or a family member starts to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing with your life, having kids, whatever it is, and instead of talking to them or telling them, no, this is what I'm doing, you walk away from the situation, right? And the last one is freeze. So in this one, it's kind of like being up here is really cool because I heard a deer, I didn't see it earlier, but have you ever walked through the woods and you notice animals and you're not moving as aggressively through the path, right? So like whenever I walk through here, if I see deer, if I'm not moving very quickly, if I have like a slower pace, the deer will freeze. It's almost like they're trying to see what I'll do next before they make a move. But like when I'm driving my car, they're out, right? So it's like that. You just freeze the situation, like you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. It could be you just shut down completely. Okay, so now that we have our definition of what the fear of judgment is, and we understand that it's our sympathetic nervous system response, right? Sympathetic meaning the fight or flight response. So how you respond to stress, to a perceived threat. So your version of judgment and how that is threatening your individual psyche. Now let's move on to, what did I say next? We got the types. Okay, so the types, right? So the types, I don't really know how to phrase types of fears of judgment. I don't know how to phrase that. But these different types can come from society, right? So more of like a global thing, or a bigger picture thing. So society doesn't have to be globally, like as I just phrased it, but it could just be the people, the area in which you live. So I live in South New Jersey, and there's very much a culture in South New Jersey. When I visit my friends in Austin, it's different there. And so it could just be you feel the weight of the pressure from society and what society wants from you in your sphere, in your bubble, right? Then there could be a little bit smaller, we niche it down a little bit more, and we have your work environment, what your work culture is like, and the way that the work culture enforces or impresses what you should or shouldn't be doing. Like if your work environment has a specific culture, maybe let's just call it a toxic culture for a moment, and you consistently resist that everyone's telling you like you should do this, or you should do that, you should do this. It might be coming from an individual person, but it's the collective of the work culture at large that is enforcing, if you will, there's a better word for that, but impressing that judgment upon you. And then we can take it down a little bit more. I mean, a work culture could be small, but it could be larger. And I think many people work in a larger work culture. Take it down a little bit more, maybe it's like a family culture. Right? So your family has a way of doing things that maybe you reject or you don't want to be a part of. And so therefore, you feel that pressure all the time, that weight, that you should be doing this or you should be doing that. You feel like your mom's opinions, your dad's opinions, your sister, brother, uncle, aunt, grandparents, right? And then we can take it down to the individual. So maybe it's just like a you and a friend, or maybe you're watching this video because this can come from watching people online too, right? You learn a new piece of information and someone gives you their opinion with it. And then you could, I'm not saying you will, but you can take on someone's opinion just by watching a video and feel the weight of that. Right, so then it can come from an individual person, whether it's someone who's super close to you, like a friend, a colleague, again, going back to family, or you find someone online who resonates with you more, but then you start to take on their opinions and their judgments. And when your fear arises, you may hear their voice in your head, which that's gonna make more sense in a moment. And the last one is fears of judgment. I really need to think of a better way to phrase this. Fears of judgment that we inflict upon ourselves. Now this one can come from everything we already mentioned, right? So let's go back to the work example for a moment. The work culture is toxic. You don't like it, so you resist it all the time. People are telling you you should do this differently, you should do that differently, but you're like, no, I'm not conforming to that, whatever. But then when you're at work sometimes, maybe you feel like you're doing something that doesn't align with you, and then your mind kicks in. It's like, well, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, right? You should go apologize to that person. You know what I mean? So now our psyche is taking someone else's opinion and impressing it upon our own being. And this happens when, and this is going to make sense as I dive deeper into where this stems from, this happens when our psychological framework hasn't been fully developed. And that'll make sense in a moment here, because then the question becomes okay, we can have the judgment coming from all these different entities, like whether it's work or family structures, and like the culture of the family, the culture of work, the culture in society, like individual friends. If we can have these fears that are just impressed upon us, or better yet, that trigger us, right? So other people's judgments and opinions trigger our fear. This can happen in all these different ways, and then my own mind, the ego, can take that fear and keep me stuck in this small state by utilizing someone else's opinion. How the hell do I get out of it? Well, we have to get to the root of it. So then where does this stem from? Where does this come from? So in order to understand this, we have to understand this for a moment. First things first, I'm getting ahead of myself. In order for our psychology to be fully developed as children, we need both our mother and our father, or a mother figure and a father figure. And we need a cohesive relationship between them in order for the male side of us, or the masculine side of us and the feminine side of us, whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter. We all have both polarities within us in order for both sides of our psychology to fully develop. Now, if you grew up without one of your parents, or maybe your parents were absent-minded, or even if you had both your parents and they were emotionally unavailable, this can really stifle our psychological development, leading to a fear of judgment. This happens because as a kid, we have needs that need to be met, right? So we know the fundamental ones, and this is true for adults too. We need food, we need shelter, we need water, there was one other one I wanted to say, but I'm drawing a blank on it, and then the emotional needs that need to be met. Now, as adults, our work now is to meet those emotional needs without being codependent on the world. But as children, we are nothing more than codependent, right? We need our parents through all of it. And if we don't have one of our parents, or our parents are absent-minded, or our parents are emotionally unavailable, this will hinder our psychological development. And what this means here is we have an experience that arises and our emotions start to stir up, right? Maybe you feel ashamed of an action you took as a 5-year-old. Like, maybe you fell off your bike and you got hurt. But again, whether your parents weren't there physically, they're absent-minded or emotionally unavailable, they're either not there or don't have the capacity to help you, to nourish you, to nourish and help you cultivate the emotional side of yourself. So then we fall off our bike, we feel ashamed, we feel embarrassed. Our parents tell us, get back on the bike, you just need to try again, or suck it up, you're a man, little boys don't cry. Like whatever it is for any one person, whether you're a guy, girl, we all have our stories, right? So this thing happens, we feel ashamed, we feel embarrassed. Our parents, our guardians, whoever's there, tells us something. And because at that time in our lives, they are our world, they are our gods. I don't literally mean they're God, but they are our gods in a sense. Psychologically, we're not there yet, right? So we take their word as rule, right? So then we take their judgment, we take their opinion, we slap it on the emotion we just felt. And now, in order to receive love, we have to conform back to their opinion, right? So to put this differently, we conform, we adjust, we adapt ourselves to their egos. We can't remove that, right? And I don't say this to push blame on anyone's parents or anything of that nature, but our parents have egos. As children, if our parents can't meet our needs because they're wrapped up in their own thing, we are so divinely guided. We are so uniquely intelligent, even at birth, energetically intelligent at birth, that we will conform to them to get our needs met. Like, think about that for a minute. Your parents can't meet your emotional needs, so you adapt and adjust to their psychological and emotional state of being so that they'll love you in return. So like, let's say your mom comes home from work and she had a rough day, your dad comes from work, he had a rough day, and they just need to vent. Right? You're 7 years old, there's no one around, so they just start venting to you, right? And they vent and they feel better. And then they express their love to you. So what just happened there is you had to adapt to what they needed in order for you to get what you needed. Just like, if that resonates with you at all, just let that sit there for a minute. Pause the video and be with that. Be with whatever you're feeling. Because that's big. That's really, if you can let that land, that is huge. Okay, so now unpause the video. So with all of that in mind, how does this play into our role of fear of judgment? Well, this then creates codependent patterns, codependent behaviors, which leads to us needing somebody to feel whole and complete, to feel that sense of love again. Right? Because our parents, again, for whatever reason it does, this isn't a blame thing, we're unable to meet our emotional needs, which doesn't allow for us to psychologically fully develop and meet our own emotional needs. So then what we do is we conform to the world around us, right? It stems and starts with our parents and our siblings and our immediate family, but it's reflected and mirrored out to every relationship we see in the world, in our lives. So then these codependent patterns take on this judgment from other people all around us, right? Because all you want to do is feel loved. And if you take their opinions and their judgments and you embody them as yourself, even if they don't align to you, that person will love you. And that's the one need that you wanted met as a kid. Okay, so now that we understand the different types, we understand that the ego is so fucking intricate and so conniving, if you will, that it can take other people's opinions and impress them upon ourselves. And we understand that this was developed from an unmet childhood wound. Now the question becomes, what do we do about it? Because if any of you are similar to me in this regard, I've had fears of judgment. I'm getting the chills thinking about it, because when I came to record this video, I was worried about people seeing me record this out here, and there's actually a guy right over there, which is ironic. So as I was going to film this, I was worried about my own fear of judgment. So it's really interesting this is happening right now. So then the question becomes, what do we do about it? Well, first things first is it starts with cultivating your will. So you have to strengthen your willpower. How you doing, man? What do I mean by that? Well, there are these higher mental faculties that each one of us have, whether it's the faculty of perception, the mental faculty of willpower, right? So if you find yourself crippled or in that freeze state, that freeze sympathetic nervous system response from the fear of judgment, then it's just that you need to unlock your willpower. Our willpower stems from our solar plexus. So we gotta loosen up the energy in that region. And we need to practice and cultivate the strength of our willpower. This can start with meditation, exercise. You can do this in so many different forms. Journaling. It's something that you're not going to want to do. You're going to hear your mind try to pull you away from doing it. You're going to hear the ego try to pull you back into your smallness. But even if you do 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of meditation, or you already meditate 10 minutes a day, do it for 3 extra minutes. You work out, do it, run your mile for 3 extra seconds. Like, just push the boundaries of what your limitations are just a little bit. It doesn't have to be crazy. Just a little bit, just enough to start to forge that willpower within you. And each time you do it, it might not seem like a lot. Your ego is going to try to pull you back into the smallness and be like, oh, man, you could have done more. You should have done more. You're going to hear all the fucking opinions, all the chatter in here, right? But know this, even if you do 3 extra minutes of meditation or 3 extra minutes of journaling, you just cultivated more willpower. And each time you do that, it'll strengthen and forge a stronger bond within you, so that when the fear of judgment arises, you will have enough conscious power to override your unconscious behaviors and patterns. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, understanding your fear of judgment. Knowing what your fear sounds like, knowing what your fear feels like. Because when these fears arise, there's going to be a physiological response. Your body's going to tense up in different ways. It's going to do different things. What does that feel like? And become familiar with that. What does it sound like? What does the voice in your head sound like? There's a concept in Carl Jung's work where he discusses the 4 archetypes of the human psyche. I'm not going to go into those, but the one is the animus or the anima. The anima is the feminine voice in a man's head, and the animus is the masculine voice in a woman's head, right? And so understanding that can help you start to paint a picture of what your fears sound like. Whose voice do you hear in your head when these fears arise within you? Maybe it's your father or mother, maybe it's your sister or brother, maybe it's your boss, whether it's a male or female, right? Like for me personally, I hear that voice in my head, like I said, it's the anima for me, right? And it'll take on the voice of so many different women. I've heard ex-girlfriends, I've heard my mother, I've heard my grandmother, I've heard my sister, I've heard my cousins, my aunts, like all of them, right? And so you can start to paint a picture of what this fear sounds like and where it's stemming from. Like, it might be a generational fear that hasn't been broken until you decided to be like, you know what, I'm fucking done, right? So that's the second one. Now, the third thing that we can do to overcome our fear of judgment is practice self-acceptance and self-compassion, right? As I shared with strengthening your will, you could do a workout and you could do 2 extra reps to work on strengthening your willpower and overcoming the limitations of your mind or the limitations of your old story, right? But then when you're done that, you might give yourself a fucking high five, fist bump, you might be pumped because you're like, yeah, I fucking did it. But like an hour later, you might feel that voice kick in, that inner critic kick in and be like, well, you could have done more than that, Tyler. That sucked. You might have done 2 more, but you could have done 5 more, right? So then that inner critic kicks in later on. That's where practicing self-compassion, self-acceptance comes in. And what I mean by this is holding space for yourself. Just allow that voice to say what it's going to say. And let me tell you something. As somebody who has been moving through this energy tremendously lately, like it literally just happened as the dude walked by earlier. I'm totally leaving that part in the video. Stopping and listening to what my mind is saying and the critic that shows up, that inner fucking hater, is not always easy because I want to do something differently to shut it up. I want to distract myself from it because it's so harsh and it feels so heavy sometimes. But when you have the strength to sit in the fire with that inner critic, with that inner hater, with the fear of judgment, and hold just a little bit more space with it or for it, that is practicing self-compassion. And it's just like strengthening your will. The practice of self-compassion and your ability to hold space from a compassionate space will continue to grow and expand and flourish. It might start here, but it could turn to here, and then you're as big as the universe because you are the universe, experiencing it through your human psyche. So that's going to be the video, y'all. I hope this video has helped you overcome and completely remove all of your fears of judgment so that you can find that inner peace and move forward with your life. If you took anything from the video, I'd appreciate it. If you could like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Until the next video, y'all, peace out.